welcome back to this episode When Push Comes to Shove. Today we have the wonderful doula, Jo. Hi Jo, welcome to the show. We're going to be talking about all things doulery. So you've been working as a doula for quite some time, haven't you?
Yeah, so I've been working as a doula or, involved in birth work now for about a decade. My first baby will be 13 in June, so a minute. So I'm a doula. I work for Doula UK as well. I'm a doula mentor for Doula UK. Also, I'm a doula with Neighbourhood Doulas. And yeah, I've about 16 years, and for the most part, I've been involved in birth work. I also run an antenatal education program called Kindred Parents. So yeah, I'm fairly ensconced in the whole birth world, I'd like to think.
So how have you been working through COVID times? How has that been for you?
Yeah, it's been really tricky. I think, like for most birth workers, it's been really difficult because we're not allowed in hospitals at the moment, and I haven't set foot in a hospital since February. But actually, to be really honest, this pandemic has given me a pause for thought, and I'm really grateful for it. Drawn me to the conclusion that I never want to set foot in hospital again. So after a decade of largely supporting women in hospitals, a very, limited amount of home births. Everyone thinks that doulas do home births, don't they? They think that's all we do is home births. Actually, the majority, as you well know, is in hospitals. And so what I noticed as I was sort of drawing towards a mum that I'd be supporting to due date is that I wasn't feeling any anxiety. I was like, there's a complete lack of anxiety as the sort of due date looms. I don't have that because I'm not having to consider how I navigate a hospital system, how I navigate healthcare providers, doctors, midwives, whoever on the day. I have absolutely no anxiety about supporting birth. That's, I feel that's my calling. But I had lots of anxiety and reticence, and I've actually had the opportunity to pause with this. I realise I've probably had some post-traumatic stress around supporting in hospital, and part of me don't want to be going through this pandemic, but part of me is incredibly grateful for the pause to be able to see actually where I was in terms of how I support and what I was experiencing. So if I'm experiencing that as a birth worker, a doula, what is a woman experiencing? So yeah, I've been really grateful for this time. And so as I navigate forward in my work, I am at the point where I want to be preparing women to give birth at home on their own terms, in their own sovereignty, and everything around that, and what can I do to prepare that and support with that.
So do you also support free birth?
Yeah, this is again has been something that's kind of stepped on my path as well. Like I guess I kind of looked at it previously, something that was tricky, or I shouldn't do that. What about this and what about that? And actually, I had an interesting experience over the summer where that came forward, where it looked like it was going to be a free birth situation. And we prepared for that because home birth was taken off the table, but the woman I was supporting was absolutely adamant she wanted to give birth in her own home with her partner and her sister and me, and that was it. And actually what happened on the day is that the dad called in the home birth team, and the birth was fine, but actually their presence completely and utterly altered things that didn't need to happen. It was a beautiful, effortless birth when they were in the kitchen, and in the middle, the minute that they came in, and sort of all this adrenaline and questions, and the placenta actually took longer to birth than the baby did. And this was a kind of real kind of epiphany moment for me. I've been doing this for 10 years, but it took something so simple. The universe always provides, I think, always provides these, opportunities to see. And I really looked at it for what it was, and my own, how I navigated birth as well, and how I could be impacted, and how I could largely be also given off my adrenaline, all of those things that we talk about when we're preparing women. Am I doing that as a birth worker? And yes, I probably was, and probably have been. So yeah, the short answer is absolutely, I will be supporting free births. And I've actually just completed training with Radical Free Birth Society. So that's been, again, another kind of epiphany for me, I've just spent sort of 3 months talking about free birth, radical birth, and all of that, and I feel really sort of ready for 2021 and to support women in their own power.
That's awesome. It is very, very important. I think as a people, we're so used to following and doing what everyone else does that we don't realize that we have options and that we can ask questions and that we can birth on our own terms. So in the hospitals, did you find that your energy was sometimes more focused towards talking with the healthcare providers rather than actually being with your clients?
I noticed that I was just readily combative. You know, your arm
Sort
is
of
on
walk in like, right.
Yeah. And it could be the nicest person that walks in the room and you could get on with them, but there's still that sense of protectiveness and trying to help women navigate these systems, and these systems are completely broken. I can't do that. I can't do that as a singular human being. You can't do that. You know, we cannot change these systems from inside the system. I hear people say that and I completely think it's the wrong way about it. What we need to be doing is raising women up to completely understand their bodies, the hormonal blueprint of birth, and then they can give birth in the ways that they innately know, instead of looking to systems that were never in place for birth. They were in place for safe deliveries, and that is different. You know this, it's completely different. A safe delivery isn't the same as a woman having a birth that is, she comes away feeling like she could do anything. And I've attended those births, so I know the difference. In hospital, for me, it felt like I could do either one of two things. I could shrink, just try and sort of mouse my way through it and just say to everybody in the room, done that, was so angry with myself after it, many times actually. Or I could, I could be combative, and I could ask the questions, and I could demand the research, and I could parallels with being argumentative. And no one needs that either. That doesn't help anyone. It's not helping her oxytocin. It's not helping my adrenaline. All of this picture provides us with the narrative that's only going to move in one direction, with a woman who's going to require medicine in order to give birth. So for me, to step aside from that and really look at it from what it is, has been a huge epiphany, and I'm really grateful.
So earlier on you mentioned neighbourhood doulas. So I just want to go back there for a second. Most of the births that are supported in hospital situations.
Yeah.
And we're often working with women who have come from an upsetting background or domestic violence, places like this. Do you see yourself working with neighbourhood doulas continuing? There are home births within neighbourhood doulas, is that correct?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I mean, I've not attended one, I have to say. I mean, it's definitely something I would like to work on personally, because, it gets back to what you just said a minute ago about women not really understanding their choices. And women from the backgrounds of, who are using neighbourhood doulas, English might be their second language. They might be coming from a traumatized background. They might be coming from a refugee background, in the refugee community, whereby they really fully don't understand the NHS system. I mean, most people of this country don't fully understand the choices that they have. So in order for them to have anything near an empowered choice, we really need to be incredibly clear about how they can be supported and where they would like to be supported, where they know all of their choices. And then if they choose a hospital birth, that's completely their choice, and there's someone there to be with them for that. But I think, you've hit the nail on the head really in your question, in that, I don't think there's enough work within that field to support those women to understand about home birth and how it could work for them.
Do you see a difference in the hospital and the way that clients are dealt with when perhaps English is their second language, or they come from a more, a harder background, for example, domestic violence or a refugee? Do you see a difference in the care that is given to these women compared to your regular paying clients?
Yeah. I mean, I could tell you, this could be a whole other interview. One of the first women I ever supported was around baby be 5 in February. and I supported her in a very long induction. In fact, I was only meeting her as she was going into labour. So we'd had no pre-planning, there'd been no antenatals, it was a very sort of last minute, can you support this woman? So I went in to meet her, and very long induction where I just felt like every step of the way this woman was being pushed towards augmentation, induction, more medicine, everything thrown at her. And because we didn't have a relationship really, she was having to trust me out of nowhere without any prior knowledge of me, who I am, what I stand for, or any of those things. And also, English was her second language. And what I noticed is this kind of like talking down to. I mean, that happens inherently anyway, I feel, within most practices in the NHS, I'm sorry to say. Women are always talked down to, but I definitely felt it also seemed to be this idea that, she would be stronger and more capable, which ties into so many of the beliefs that, women of colour are stronger and able to bear more pain and all of these things. To see it before my eyes shouldn't really have been a surprise. There's a level of privilege for me to acknowledge that, but it absolutely did happen. And of course went on to have a C-section. Yes, that has been my experience, and so many more like this as well. Just this idea, this is what we do, and you really should accept our help. It's a kind of
we know better.
I mean, isn't it great that we have this in place for you? So just be a good girl and let us get on with our thing. So often I've had to intercept and say, sorry, can we just slow down a minute? Can we just explain what's about to happen? Being very clear about consent. Do you understand what that means? Because people are setting up intravenous antibiotics without any conversation. I mean, that's happened so many times, I can't even tell you. It's actually a minefield.
Yes, the line on consent is quite skewed in hospitals sometimes.
All the time.
Yeah, all the time. Midwives feel like they have consent, but they haven't actually asked the questions. And the other thing that I find a lot in hospitals is that the consent is, the pros and cons are never spoken about. So it's more, you need to have this. Do you consent?
Yeah. Yeah,
but are there other options? And of course, if you're in labour, the last thing you can even think about is asking questions. Absolutely. And you can't take that information in at that point. Yeah. And so it does make it really difficult sometimes for women.
And consent isn't consent when one person holds all the power, right? If someone's presenting you with what looks like some choices, and then your only option is to agree with them because they hold all the power, that isn't consent. Yeah. It's we have to really get to the crux of what consent is within medicine, within birth, because so often I think that when we talk about consent, we have this sort of idea that it's literally just about giving a bit of information and the woman saying yes, or the person saying yes. And there's so much more to it. There's a whole load of information that often doesn't come through, and that is where doulas do fill in that gap, in that if someone isn't being given all of the information, we are there to say, actually, have you considered this? Can we look at all of the options? And can we also break down what those risks are? I've never been in a situation in close to a decade whereby a woman is being encouraged, coerced into an induction, whereby all of the risks have ever been volunteered. That has never happened in my experience. Or I've been in a situation whereby women have come out of a hospital appointment, rang me and said, so I need to have an induction because, okay, right. So what was that conversation? All of the reasons why this woman, but none of the risks actually volunteered around that. Mm-hmm. And so you then have a woman who is completely and utterly confused about what it is that she should do, but now feels unsafe by just remaining pregnant. It really is such a situation whereby women really need to be in their own bodies and yet we are bombarding them with one-sided information.
For sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fear mongering and scaring of women, pregnant women. It's very insane. Some of the things that I've heard from clients, and I've been in the room, and a midwife didn't know that I was a doula, and I was just sitting there as he thought I was the sister. And some of the things that he said, my client looked at me and I looked at her, and I let him talk, and then I asked him, so what are the actual risks and what are the pros and the cons? And he didn't know. He couldn't tell me the statistics. He couldn't tell me why.
No.
And he got nervous and he said, well, your baby could die. And, you know, what's the likelihood of that then? Oh, well, I don't know. You just told my client that her baby could die. We'd like to know the statistics on that. And he couldn't do it. So there's a lot of that fear mongering, shoulder dystocia shouted around, and placenta's dying, and you know, there's a lot of this.
I don't know how we're here. I don't know how we're here.
I mean, how are so many babies born with all of this that happens so often, apparently?
No idea. My dad's the youngest of 11, and we, you know, really wish my grandma was around now. She died many years ago. But, you know, speaking to my dad, so he was the youngest of 11, born in 1950. So he must have been one of the first to be born in a hospital, we think. So all of those babies that came before would have been born at home, one set of twins. Pretty sure she had a breech birth, one of 11, pretty sure there was a breech in there, right? Midwife coming to the house, you know, all of those things that were completely normal, we look at as some kind of like relic from us. And the reality is that we've kind of got it completely the wrong way. So much fear mongering, you know, it's hard to even, for me personally, to even look at the system other than just completely fear mongering all of the time.
So moving forward, you're going to be focusing on home births and free births and birthing outside of a hospital. What is your advice for women who are interested in this type of birth, in a home birth or a free birth? What would your top piece of advice be?
So my top piece of advice would be become really comfortable and knowledgeable about the hormonal blueprint of birth. Know what that is, read about it. And if you really go down a rabbit hole of that, you will understand that the way for you to give birth, for you to, you know, create an emergence into motherhood, is to have a completely undisturbed birth. And that would be my top advice. And from that, everything else, all of the decisions you make will be from that. And I would also say, if I was to add another point, it would be really, really super mindful about who you invite into that space. If you're having midwives or you're not having midwives, be super clear about who you are inviting into your sexual reproductive space, because that's what it is at the end of the day. This is not meant to be a medical event. And so if you're inviting someone into that space, make sure you are so comfortable with them, and, you know, really honor your body, really honor how your body knows exactly what to do. You have everything within you to enable you to give birth to your baby.
Have you ever worked alongside independent midwives?
You know what, I know a few of them, but I've never worked alongside them, which has always been, always felt as a bit of a shame. You know, their knowledge base for me is outstanding. Like they are the people that know about undisturbed birth. They practice it. You know, that if you sit down and have a conversation with an independent midwife, chances are her transfer rate is about 2%. It is very, very low, and with good reason. You know, they know exactly what they're looking for, and they get out of the way. They allow birth to happen. You know, they see we say the 3 stages of birth. I question that entirely. They see the myriad of stages of birth, and they get out of the way, and they intervene only when really necessary. What happened and is happening to independent midwifery in this country is an absolute disgrace. And it speaks to everything about what we think about birthing women and their choices, in that we only think that they should be aligned with a system that does not honour birth. It honours live deliveries. End of.
Absolutely. A big part of this movement was started to try and help the independent midwives get their insurance back, because they were suddenly stopped in April. They were no longer allowed to work, and their insurance has been tripled. And so
I went on a march in about 2014, I think it was, with my mentor at the time, Mars Lord, and that's when the sort of the rumblings of what was going to happen with taking their insurance off the table was happening back then. I think it was 2014. We marched all the way, I think, to Downing Street, all the way through London, demanding better insurance. And now look where we are. It's a disgrace.
Absolutely. But you're right with what you said before about this. The change has to come from the women. Mm-hmm. And that's a big part of what we're doing with this movement, is that it needs to come from the ground. There's no point. We can't change the system from inside the hospitals as doulas. It's impossible. You know, there are great midwives out there working in hospitals. There are amazing midwives.
Great doctors.
Amazing doctors. But we can't change this by going into hospital and asking questions. We need to change it from the get-go, from the birthing people having children. And that's where it needs to start. And we're hoping that these interviews will help inspire and have people ask questions.
Yeah,
look for the answers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could talk all day about this. I'm so sort of passionate about it. You know, I honestly feel like we, as women, you know, we are kind of made to feel sort of scared of our bodies, our dirty, you know, ugly bodies that are, you know, do gross things like bleed and then give birth and, you know, grow hair in places they shouldn't. And then we get to the point where women are pregnant, and then we try to this information without, you know, illuminating their choices, give them all this information about the birth. Mm-hmm. And it's too little too late. You know, we really need to be speaking to girls when they're going, and boys when they're going through early sex education about birth. You know, there shouldn't be this, you know, a massive amount of information being given to them when women are, you know, 30 weeks pregnant, 25 weeks pregnant. It just doesn't make any sense. It's because we're butting heads against our own culture that doesn't support it, right? You know, we have an entire system in place that, you know, is only about the conveyor belt of live deliveries. We need to do so much better in raising the education around birth and breastfeeding in the 4th trimester, because, you know, it really speaks to the heart of allowing women to see that this is about their emergence into motherhood. And for some women, it would feel like their emergence into womanhood. And we're just going to drop all this knowledge when, you know, at the last minute. So, yeah, I think we've got a long way to go.
We do. And it starts with us, starts with women.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And thank you for everything you're doing. I think this is an incredible project. I can really see it moving in the right direction. And, you know, your timing of it, I think, is perfect. Thank you.
Is there anything else you would like to add?
I would really hope that what women would, you know, women in birthing communities would take from this is that they have everything within them to be able to bring their babies into the world completely undisturbed. And we are all the descendants of people who free birthed or people that birthed with a, you know, a wise woman in attendance. And you know, that is it. Technocratic interventions is seriously not helping us whatsoever. So yeah, I would leave on that, really.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Jo, for joining us today.
Thank you, Carly.
Thank you all for watching, and we will see you soon.